Welcome to the Working Women's Channel. My name is Clara Capano, and we're going to share the real secrets to success. Come on in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Working Women's Channel. I am your host, Clara Capano, and I am being joined by an amazing ball of energy. Antoinette is here with us, and she and I were connected by a mutual friend. And man, this is just someone I knew I needed to be connected with. And Antoinette, it is such an honor to have you here for our show. So welcome. And why don't you just tell us quickly a little bit about you?
Well, first, let me just say thank you. And as soon as I saw your name, not because you're a fellow Italian,
Of course.
it's like Clara Capano. I know Clara. I went to school with Clara. It was like that kind of feeling. So I was like, yeah, let's sign me up. And as you noticed, you may have noticed, I actually picked the earliest date because I was looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm really happy to be on your show. I love what you're doing, and I love connecting with women who are empowered and women who are about to be empowered.
Yeah.
So it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a woman who's had many careers. I always knew I was going to be in front of the camera, but then I got to LA and I took off very quickly as an actress, and then somehow ended up being a very, very prominent event planner due to just falling into it. And then I started hiring hundreds and hundreds of people, running very large scale events. That I did for my house, and I had two little babies. Which when you talk about just the challenges that come up, I can talk about that a little bit. But anyway, I pivoted. I'm a comic, a stand-up comic. I work professionally at the Comedy Store. I have my picture on the wall, and
So
I came back into. I know. It was so fun. I got invited there recently for. I got to see Goldie Hawn and Lily Tomlin, and it was a very intimate group. It was only last weekend, but I always get so excited when I walk through the hall and there's my picture, and I'm like, I've lived 1,000 lives. Like, that really happened. And my point in bringing it up is I became a comic just as a trying it out, and it turned out to be something that I got very successful at very fast. And then I came back to the scene right before COVID, and I was doing a big show, and it was called Antoinette and Friends, and I had all these big comics, and I was reemerging into kind of the limelight again as a comic. And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And it shut down the whole business. So I pivoted to talk show host, which is what I've always wanted to do since I was a little girl anyway. And that's probably why I was doing it all.
Exactly. Me too. I know.
Yeah.
It's one of my most fun things to do. I just love talking with people, learning about them. So yes, you and I have a lot of that. So let's talk about this because, you moved to Los Angeles, you had success, early on, which not everybody has when they go out to, la la land out there. But, you did have these kids, and talking about pivoting, we all know that the road to success is not always an easy one. When was there a time in your life where maybe, it wasn't going so smoothly, and you had to, stand up and you had to dig deep and keep going further?
Wow, I know exactly the moment. I had two young children. I was running very large scale events, and I was doing it somehow on my own terms, without a computer, on the phone, basically training people over the phone and making sure that they would deliver these large scale events. And I didn't realize, and I guess a lot of people don't realize, this sounds a little bit maybe too graphic, but when a woman has her cycle, and I was having very difficult cycles after my child, I didn't realize how much vitality I was losing every month. And I became severely anemic without even knowing.
Yeah.
So not only was raising two small children, I was
Which needs a lot of
responsible.
energy to begin
Two
with.
boys, two boys, 2 years apart. And I was running these large scale events, and I had to give up. And I got a big stand up gig at Caroline's in New York City. And I was wanting to take that. And I just like had a system shut down. My ears started ringing from the anemia. And I just was like, you know what? I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm like falling apart. And of course, they didn't know I was anemic. And then when I found out, it was like, whatever. But I had to prioritize. I had to go, you know what? First things first,
Mhm.
my children, for my health first,
Mhm.
obviously, then to take care of the children, and then to kind of take care of the business and go, what? I have a plan. I'm not going to get derailed. I've come here to do this.
Mhm.
It may take a little longer, but you have to put yourself on the list. And that would be my big message to the answer to that question is women, sometimes we don't put ourselves on our own list.
Mhm.
And I have learned the hard way that there has to be a tremendous amount of self-care in
Yeah.
order to care for others. And that is an integral part of my everyday now. And without that, I
Mm.
could not function on the level that I function at.
Yeah. And it's that same message of, when you're on the plane and the, air masks come down, you have to take care of yourself first. And unfortunately, I think many of us learn that the hard way. I know I did too by having my big breakdown. But, it also is requiring trade offs because when you decide to put yourself first, you have to change first your mindset that it's not a selfish thing. It's actually one of the most selfless things because you can't give to others unless you're healthy. But it also does require trade offs. It means you have to say no to some things. So,
Yeah.
what were some of the trade offs that you found you had to make so that you could be there for yourself, but then also be there for your kids and for your business?
Yeah. I had to put my career,
Mhm.
um, that's even hard for me to even say it, but I
Yeah.
had to put my career aside
Mhm.
because I couldn't fit it in. I couldn't give up the job, even
Mhm.
though my husband was working. But I was also there was a moment where he had not a financial crisis, a health crisis, and it was a severe health crisis out of nowhere. And I had to uh, just prioritize and say, you know what, can't do this right now. I have to think about doing that at a later date. And also, I would say that the helpful part of it is that I always knew as a young girl that, and I grew up in Brooklyn,
Mhm.
um, that I knew that my success, there was a part of me that knew that my success would come later.
Okay.
As I knew that I would gain enough wisdom as a woman and
Mhm.
gain enough experience as a professional and as just somebody in life that I would then have more to contribute. And so there was always a part of me, a quiet part of me that was like, okay, you'll get to do it. And
Mhm.
then oddly enough, and I hope I'm answering your question as I'm going, that when COVID hit and that moment of like, oh, this is something in some way you knew you would be witness to, that I knew
Mhm.
that there would be a big world shift, and I knew that I would be witness to that. And somehow I went, oh, this is the moment you've been waiting for to choose to have more visibility
Yeah.
and to give your wisdom
Right.
back.
Because again, if COVID wouldn't have hit, you wouldn't have started the show the way that you've done it. And, I think the same thing. If COVID wouldn't have hit, I wouldn't have launched this show and my other show and done some of the items with speaking. So it's understanding, the quietness and sometimes surrendering and being open to the
Right.
pivots and knowing that
Right.
sometimes these things are exactly what we need. I want to talk about this pivot because so many times this is just really on my mind right now from something that I heard over the weekend. I was listening to a podcast and this idea that sometimes things don't go according to plan. And our initial thought is it's a failure. And knowing that it's not a failure, that it's just not working right now, and I think coming from your background of sometimes maybe you didn't get a part or again with having to stop doing the comedy route and starting this, it's you had two choices. One, you could have looked at it as I'm failing, or two, you could have looked at it as let's reapproach this. And where do you think that came from? Is that just something you were raised with, or do you kind of hear the little voices in your head talking you off the ledge?
I love your questions, and
Thank you.
I really like your message and how you communicate. So anyway, thank you for an intelligent question. I I think I've been always very, very in tune with myself, and
Mm.
I've always known just that road would appear, or the next rock to step on would show itself.
Mhm.
And I've always known that. And I am also always felt like I was being guided
Mhm.
in a weird way. So I totally hear what you're saying. Sometimes you want to muscle something into happening,
Mhm.
and you see it the certain way. And it's like, if I do this and I do that and I connect with this person, it's supposed to happen. And a lot of times the whatever this is,
Right.
the reality that we're living, there is a co-creational part of it, that you sometimes there's a way that they're co-creating with you, whoever they are, whatever this thing of called life is. There's a co-creation. Sometimes it doesn't look the way you think, but they're actually trying to get you set up so that you can have what you want, and it doesn't always look the way you think. It's
Yeah.
actually better.
It
It's
is, and
actually
I
better.
know, that was something I had to learn as I gotten older because I know in my 20s and even into my 30s, I would just push so hard and be like, "No, this is gonna work." And rather than now where I'm like, "Okay, it's not working. Let's re-examine it." And I'm not as attached, to big outcomes. But
That's
for
big.
me, that was more, getting older. I want to go back to this idea of, the trade-offs that we make and being able to put your career aside and this whole concept of self-care. Um, there's a lot of women that are still struggling with this. There's a lot of women who have younger kids, and this concept of self care is still so far out of reach for them. If you saw someone, struggling with this, what is maybe one first step that you could offer somebody to get them to understand that this idea of investing in yourself and taking care of yourself is needed?
I would say that actually a couple of minutes a day
Hmm.
used properly is quite powerful,
Hmm.
right? And that even if you're raising kids, which takes a monumental effort to
Right.
do, and to
Hmm.
do it well, is the biggest gift you can give the planet, is
Hmm.
to raise integrated young people who become powerful, integrated men and women. That's what we need. And so, the idea of raising children is highly creative and super important, but it's time consuming.
Hmm.
I always tell the people that I run into that I have in my followers, the young women, that there's a process of just spending time with yourself that's highly manifesting.
Hmm.
When you're in your zone and you're taking care of yourself, there's an energy that happens and you start to, it's almost like it becomes exponential. You spend 2 minutes, that 2 minutes turns into 4 minutes. And that 4 minutes becomes, wow, connecting with myself. When you connect with yourself, then you can see the world differently, which enables opportunity to come to you.
Yeah.
How is it sometimes that, you and I could be sitting in a room, or we could be sitting next to people, and you and I, will have a completely different experience than other people might be having.
Mhm.
It's our framework. It's how we teach ourselves to look at the world. And growing up in Brooklyn, I always say it was the best thing because it prepared me
Mhm.
for in New York and in Brooklyn, the way I grew up. I didn't grow up like tough. I mean, I grew up in a like kind of like mob territory, like mobsters and a lot of colorful characters. But I always say that if I didn't have my eyes open at every minute of the day, I would miss an opportunity potentially, but I could also get killed.
Yeah.
So I learned how to navigate by kind of looking for the goodness, but staying vigilant about who I'm around. So,
Mhm.
I would say that if you have children, give yourselves 2 minutes
2
to
minutes.
start with,
Yes.
and love yourself up and ask yourself how you feel about your life. And
Mhm.
it may not be so good. You may be really beaten down and you may be feeling like, you know what? I don't have a moment and I don't really feel great about my life. Identifying that is power, because
Yeah.
now you know how you feel and your feelings are your
Mhm.
power source and your guidance system. Anyway.
Absolutely. I love that. So, a question that I've been dying to ask you, and you might have a completely different perspective since you're in it, but I love comedy. I watch comedy all the time. And from my perspective is it is more of a male dominated field than a female dominated field, meaning that I see a lot more male comedians having success than female comedians. And I would love to ask, what do you think are some of the strengths that women can bring to the table, not just in comedy, but in business in general that are
Oh,
different than men?
first of all, I don't tend to notice so much of that stuff. I don't know why, but maybe because I've lived a lot on my own terms, and being a comedian, I came into comedy already as an actress, and
Mhm.
I really came in at the top, which was magical, right? So I didn't have to like go on the road and do all this sort of stuff. It was like immediate, and it happened, and I was very grateful for that. So I didn't really feel that, oh man, guys, I love men, so I didn't really notice that. However, I think there's a big challenge in the world today, because for mostly for our men, because they haven't been given the okay
Mhm.
to feel all of the things that they feel, and all of the pressures that they have, all of the labels and roles that we forced them into. We forced in everybody. Women are in roles and men are in roles. And I just feel like men are struggling because
I agree completely.
I
And
mean,
as
really,
much
we
as
need to,
I want, yeah, as much as I want a movement to empower women, I'm hoping that others are doing it for men because I agree completely. We're all
and
struggling.
actually, we are struggling. And unless we invite men to the table as women, then we're not necessarily going to help guide them, which
Mhm.
is what women do. We guide and we take care of, and we also are more fluid with how. I don't know if I can use the word fluid anymore, but we're
Yeah,
not. I don't even know what I can use anymore, but it's okay. We understand how we feel. If you don't know how you feel in any given moment, you're not really using everything that's available to you in that moment to make decisions in business. I can be in the room, and I'm often in the room in very large meetings with big executives, and I'm feeling my feelings about what's taking place and what's being said. My feelings are my guidance system. Do I, emote? Do I get crazy? Do I? No, but they give me information. And I think for men, I would say that the big thing that would be helpful for men is to identify that feelings are okay, and your feelings actually are really important to making decisions.
yeah.
And I think we see the results of decisions being made without their feelings involved.
Absolutely. And I do think as women, again, being able that, that we have a little bit more permission to, again, tap into those feelings, lets us see things. And I think just naturally being a little bit more empathetic and being able to understand that is a strength for us.
A lot more empathetic, I would even say. It's like, put yourself, walk in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. I think empathetic and sympathetic and caring about
Mhm.
everyone that we encounter is going to help us navigate whatever situation is in front of us.
Yeah.
And like I said, I really do think my heart goes out to, I have two men that I'm raising.
Mhm. And I've
So
got a
I'm very,
17-year-old coming up, so I get it.
yeah, you get it. And I'm sympathetic to everything that we're enduring as well. I mean, don't get me started. I'll go crazy on what's happening and how to navigate just being a woman. And I've had situations that I never had before, like casting couch, which you would not think at this, but I've had situations recently. I'm like, oh, look at that.
Mhm.
Oh, look at that. That is so pervasive in the culture in our society that that person, that man, didn't even realize what he just said
Mhm.
and did.
Isn't it
And so
interesting? Yeah.
it's pervasive. So in this situation, because this person I actually care about, I went, oh, here's a situation that if I didn't know this person, I would be like, I would be taken back. I would be on defense. And
Mhm.
then, but in this situation, like, wow, he was raised that
Mhm.
that's normal,
Right.
right? And so I just think, as raising two men, I would really encourage us to just not be reactive, but be
Yeah.
responsible.
And I love that because I think, and again, these issues going on, we're not even going to go into them because it'll just take
Right,
hours and hours. But
right,
and it's not that we're accepting them and saying they're okay, but I do think we need to stop for a moment and look at the perceptual map because
right.
they may not have the intention that we think they may. And if so, they need to have the
Well,
repercussions.
they may and they may not.
And they may not. But I think just again, give it that moment to dig a little bit deeper, to really find out what's at the heart of it, and to have that humanity to really bring it in and just say, okay, let's just pause for a moment rather than again getting so reactive and blowing it up when it may not need to go that direction.
Right, because then we're just flipping the ball back or we're holding
Fighting.
the rubber band.
Yeah.
You can't, then you never come to the middle. There's never a resolution. I'm not saying I know how that goes, how that resolution comes, but it certainly comes more if we lean into each other than be reactive. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we talked about before we started recording, we talked about this idea of, with my tagline and this concept of living on your terms. And you were able to say, that that's something that you're very proud of is being able to live on your terms. Some people don't always get that. And I know for me, I didn't really understand that until I was in my 30s.
yeah.
What do you think is a message you want to give to women out there who maybe are struggling with doing it all on their terms?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. This whole conversation is very timely because I was putting a bio together for a project that I'm working on, and they wanted a very comprehensive bio. So I was going through my whole history, and I thought, wow, look at you. You really didn't you always made yourself the boss. Like
Mhm.
you found a way to work for somebody else and provide this boss what they needed, but you were able to do it on your own terms. And I started to think, well, why is that? Why were you able to do that? Well, because I was smart and I also wanted to be able to have my freedom. And I knew that I could do the job without sitting at a desk. I knew that I could do it if you just let me do it my way. I'll get it done and then some. And that's what I did. And I did that throughout my whole career in many high profile situations. So I was lucky to have that, what's the word, gumption.
Yes.
Um, but sometimes I think it's hard when you have small children and you have an idea. But I would say the most important thing is being able to care for yourself, let the seed of that idea really germinate inside you and water it first and really be with it and and decide how important it is to you and I have found this and I'm sure you have as well. When you're doing things that are in service, that is for the greater good,
Mhm.
somehow, even for in your community, the greater good, somehow that gets an extra watering session and it sort of grows more quickly. And so I would say, like, really spend the time to decide if that's what you want and then time manage around it. Find the time to really explore it, because as you explore it, that excitement grows, and if there's a little bit of in service to it, it grows exponentially. And that's kind of how I approach every idea, because sometimes you have an idea and you're really not sure, like you sometimes think, I've learned this from a master, like I'm working with somebody who's masterful, who's worked with creators across, you know, the many disciplines. And one thing I have learned from him is sometimes you have to pivot in
Mhm.
the process of entrepreneurship, right? You start off with one idea, but then it changes. And then you put it down and it changes. And you have to be okay with that process of growth and not look at it as a failure, look at it as a way to progress. And that will kind of, I think, help you germinate an idea and take it to fruition.
I agree. I just think that's so beautiful is again just spending time and again thinking and looking at it and letting it germinate. I think that's great. So I know that your journey is nowhere near being done. So
No.
what can you share with us? What's next on the play for Antoinette?
Oh, Lordy. I have my talk show is Antoinette and Friends.
Mhm.
And I'm just excited to be getting a lot of really beautiful people coming towards me across all of the disciplines, which I'm so excited about. And I wish I could tell you who they are, but we can't, because we just can't. But there's a lot of really beautiful television stars that have, affected my whole life. And we have some creators on multiple levels. So I'm really excited about the next season, which is coming up. We're shooting starting November 12th. Um, I'm working as a producer, so I'm working on a very big project right now. So I'm just excited because I'm expanding my skill set,
Mhm.
which I realize, you know, sometimes you have a skill set, you go, well, it doesn't fit into any box. It
Mhm.
doesn't fit into any label of like, oh, this is this job and this is this job. You have this beautiful spectrum of things that you do. And so I'm just excited that I'm able to utilize a lot of the things that make me really happy but it's been a long ass road. It has been a
Yeah.
long ass road. I mean, seriously, my kids are older now, and boy, and they're almost out of the house, and I'm really doing my best to stay present with them because I know how this is just a moment. And I also know that when you have 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds, this is an important trajectory time where you send them off. And so
Mhm.
I'm also, I'm really focused on my boys, to
Yeah,
be honest. That's part
yeah.
of the answer to the question is I want to send them off in a beautiful way. And I also want to appreciate the little time I have left with them in under my wings.
Love it. Oh, well, this has just been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing time with us today. Some of the things that we covered is, again, listening to your own inner guide, the power of taking care of yourself and how that leads to success. And, again, just learning how to make sure that you're living on your terms, even if that means pivoting from time to time. So, thank you so much for sharing these lessons. I can't wait for all of our audience to see that. And we'll put all of your contact information, all of it to be able to watch your show. But is there
Thank you.
one platform that's, is the best platform for people to find
Oh,
you on?
yes. Thank you so much. I have AntoinetteandFriends.com, but if you go to my YouTube channel, it's Antoinette and Friends. You'll see a lot of the interviews and conversations. I've had in-depth interviews, conversations with some really interesting people. It's more than the usual 7 minutes that the major networks give, so we're able to delve in. And I would just love you to go to my YouTube channel and hit subscribe and notification and have a good time if you have time.
Beautiful. I love it.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thanks so
What an
much.
honor. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
And thank you, listeners. Thank you for following us for another episode of the Working Women's Channel. We will see you next time.